Welcome to Transformative Principal, where you learn how to be a leader and not just a manager of a to-do list. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Your to-do list is a hungry monster that is never satisfied. For the last year and a half, I've helped principals get awards, get promoted, and find the time to do the work that really matters. I recently opened a new mastermind slot. Schedule a call with me and let's overcome the stressed and isolated principal position together. Go to the show notes for this episode at transformativeprincipal.org and click Schedule a Call with Jethro. Welcome to Transformative Principal. This is episode 308. I am very excited to have Adam Bellow on the podcast. You may not know Adam personally, but you have probably heard of Breakout EDU, which he is the co-founder of, and something that I quickly adopted in my school and love that program. So Adam, welcome to Transformative Principal, and thanks for being here.
Oh, Jethro, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for adopting Breakout EDU. That's always nice to hear.
Yeah, well, it's really cool. And what I ended up doing was setting up a stealthy Breakout EDU in the front office that was just sitting there, and then kids had to figure out how to get the clues and where they were in the school, and it wasn't tied to any content or curriculum or anything like that. It was just a fun little thing for kids to do, and it was really awesome. And everybody asked what it was, and only a few kids took the initiative to actually try to find the clues and solve it.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. That's really, really fun.
Yeah, very cool. So today, however, we're going to be talking about learning with AI, and this is in preparation for your keynote and one of the sessions that you're going to do at FETC here in about a month, and that is, you can register for that, fetc.org. And so let's talk a little bit about learning with AI. And I want to start talking about what that actually means, because some people think that means that these ed tech companies are going to save us and make teachers obsolete so that we never have to work again. And I don't think that that's really the future we want. So talk a little bit about how you see learning with AI in broad strokes first.
Yeah, I think that AI, everyone's definition is so across the board, but basically kind of the way I see it playing into education is kind of twofold. One is just smarter information to help build smarter, consumers of content and knowledge and being able to find things more quickly. And then the other more complex way of thinking about it is that metacognitive piece where the technology will kind of be able to interact with us in a way where it's serving our needs. And I think that that's kind of the much more interesting piece is when you start thinking about, well, we have the ability to have these tools in our classroom, and, and the tools can be anything from, I don't want to trigger anyone's devices, but the device by Amazon or Google, or I have to be very careful in my office. I think I have all of them. So I don't want to have a symphony of talking, but basically like using those devices to answer questions is such a periphery, and then being able to kind of converse and get much deeper into a student's ability to learn and serve information as it's needed. And, the other piece of it is having kids program these devices and kind of tap into a much deeper level of learning. So,
yeah, for sure. So let's start with that first idea of just serving information to kids when they need it, where they need it. We definitely experienced that when Google was created, and we could now search for just about anything on the internet. And now AI and these voice assistants make it so that we can basically do it with our voice instead of having to pull up the browser to do it, which is just an amazing thing that you can ask a question and have it answered, almost immediately, which is really powerful. And, part of that is learning how to have that conversation where it's still like it's not really serving our needs yet, but if we ask the question the right way, then it does give us what we need. What are your thoughts on that aspect of bringing that into the classroom and, having it there as a constant assistant to be able to answer low-level questions?
Yeah, I think it is really helpful to a teacher. I know even, I'm not a teacher anymore, but as a parent, I use it in probably the same way I would imagine many schools are using it. And that is to build self-efficacy and reliance on how to find information. So instead of, my kids ask me 10,000 times, what time is it? They could either look at or ask the device. They can set their own timers for, today you have 20 minutes of iPad time, set a timer, remind yourself. and for not out of laziness, but just out of being able to kind of reallocate some of those cycles and resources to the students. Things like what's the weather outside. Things like what day is it? How do you spell a word? These are all things that my kids use our device for simple math, to check their math. I mean, I don't let them use it to answer the math, but if they have a question afterwards, like, they could certainly double check their work with the device. It's the same as a calculator or looking it up online. And if you think about putting that in the classroom, there's the old classroom adage of like, ask 3 before me. So the teacher wants you to ask your peers or go look it up somewhere. That is the perfect, iteration on that, right? It's ask, the device before you ask me. I keep on pausing before I say Alexa, but basically that's kind of almost the Kleenex brand, right? And it's amazing that in just 5 years, I think it's literally in November, it was 5 years, that tool has been around. It is pretty pervasive. I mean, I don't know a tremendous number of folks, but security concerns aside, and I'm sure we might touch on that later, but this is something that my tech phobic in-laws have in their house as their little helper.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see how easy it is because again, it's voice. It's something that we do as a way to interact all day long. And yeah, I mean, I think putting that in the classroom and letting it handle some of those low level things would really, free up some other time or just build that agency in that student.
Yeah, I think that the really powerful piece of that is that when you recognize that somebody who's not tech savvy can adopt this, something like Google Glass or even smartphones, those took a little bit for people to catch on that they could be used for anybody, and now, our grandparents have iPhones and Android devices and can use them proficiently and do different things on them. But then, that took a little while to get caught up. But you're right. The Amazon devices, because they've been so cheap and so easy to access and all that, they're very ubiquitous all over the place already. And so when you think about that, let's talk a little bit about those security and privacy concerns. Do we need to have privacy concerns about having those in the classrooms? It seems like one of the things that teachers have always been against is having recording devices in their classrooms unless they're the only ones who are controlling them. And so, having an assistant in there that could capture a lot of things that the teacher may not want to have caught, or maybe they do want to have caught. I don't know. But what are your thoughts about those privacy and security issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I feel like, my personal views are obviously coloring some of my assumptions in the classroom. I'm sitting talking to you in an office where there's probably 10 different cameras from computers and devices and,
sure,
speakers that are hearing everything we say. If I pause and think about that, I think, sometimes I'm like, ooh, I don't want it to hear everything but in terms of the classroom, that there's been PA systems in classrooms. So in terms of like Big Brother in the sense of an administrator listening in, like there were times where I remember in a classroom where the PA would click on and you could hear like breathing at the other end, or you would just hear it click on and crackling once in a while. And it freaked me out. But like the reality is that, the principal could have come in at any point. And it wasn't to be scared. It was just one of those things where like, yeah, people might be listening in. In terms of the device listening in, I mean, I think that there are legitimate privacy concerns listening to students, more in like the sci-fi crime, like conspiracy theorist thing where I was reading an article the other day where it was talking about building a voice profile because it listens to your children and it's able to pick up on cadence and different vocal the way people talk, and that's a little terrifying. But how is that any different from a Chromebook that has access to your microphone, or kids doing webcam projects, or like other things where they're accessing those types of devices? I think as time goes on, we'll become a society that is probably a little more relaxed with it. The pendulum usually swings really far one way and then really far the other way and then lands in the middle. So, right now we're swinging back towards the security and the privacy. And I think that, there will be a reversal of that to some extent. And classroom, listen, there are people that are building protocols to sit on top of these devices that basically are intended to be used in the classroom and kind of try to tackle that privacy concern. So, stuff like Askmyclass, which is a programmable series of prompts with different questions and timers and translation information, and a lot of what classroom teachers would use these devices for, that's being built into the classroom and built as such. So I think that's going to help make these things a little bit more pervasive. And again, having them in your homes helps usher in these things into the classroom, because the fact that, I don't know what the percentage of teachers are, but a lot of teachers I know have at least one of these devices. And, I think you get comfortable with something sitting in your kitchen or your living room or your bedroom or whatever. And, you could see that usefulness lead into the classroom. And I think that that's kind of the key, is that the use of the tool will have to outweigh the concerns we have around it. I think that the same is true if you look at Facebook right now. A lot of people are concerned and angered by Facebook's lack of privacy and their questionable social ethics in terms of how they market and sell information and promote different types of information, whether it be hate speech or fake news or whatever. And yet a lot of people, there are some that took a stand and left, but a lot of people are like, well, posting my pictures of my kids or reading up on my favorite, whatever it is, hobby or movie or whatever it is, outweighs that.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where we are with this burgeoning technology.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And, people may be, frustrated about Facebook, but also like I get to see all my friends' updates on there. So, it's really not all that bad. And, I think that one of the areas where I would personally have concerns is with my students' information being out there somewhere in the public domain, that I didn't really want that to be the case. Now, of course, I'm a dad who, takes pictures of my kids and posts them on the internet and stuff. So I need to be cautious about how I'm phrasing that. But like, for me to do that is one thing. For the school to do that is another thing. And so being able to balance that, I think, is important. And, I don't have the answers to that just yet, but I see some real benefits. We had a device for a while, and then I stopped using it. And then a couple of my kids' teachers got them in their classroom. And so then when I brought the device back out to use it again later, my son already had this familiarity with it and this skill set with it that I didn't ever teach him, but he was actually telling me things that I could do with it, which I thought was great because he's only 9. And he was like, oh yeah, Dad, you can do this and that. And it's really cool in that regard. And at some point, they're going to become more advanced. Right now, they are basically, just skip logic of, is this happening? Yes or no? And then it moves on to the next thing. And it's not right. It's not like it's, sensing a need from me and then fulfilling that. How do you think the future of that is going to come to pass, especially in a classroom with multiple users of one device?
Yeah. And I think, taking AI a little bit more broad right now. So I definitely don't see a one-to-one classroom, ALEXA. But listen, I mean, we live in a world where if you have an Apple Watch or smartwatch of other kinds, like you likely have an assistant of some sort, whether it be Google or Bixby or Siri or whoever, accessible at your wrist. And again, I'm not proposing that that's how children will be in 5 years, and I'm not proposing that's how they should be. But I do think that taking the technology of that part of it aside, we've had a lot of talk about personalized learning. We've had a lot of talk about, AI in terms of helping kids learn. I want to look at it from a slightly different vantage point and look at it from like these chat bots. I don't know if you've had experience like working with, it's phenomenally terrifying, amazing I've had really successful interactions with a robot, and the joke is, people are like, well, that's so weird. And it's like, no, think about it. We were doing this with movie phone on the telephone 25 years ago.
Sure.
And I think for kids to be able to ask a question, and I think taking it, slightly out of the academic space, if you look at it from like a mental health space, like there's a lot of concern right now about, just students' warning signs in terms of their behavior online. What if there was, interventions that occurred based on either computer behavior, or the reverse of that is, what if students had the ability to just ping a bot and begin a conversation that could be helpful to them, so they didn't feel judged? It was a robot, but at the same point, it was able to kind of lead them to help. And that might be weird for people to hear, but I think that's we're becoming, or my kids are very comfortable with robots, very comfortable. And I think that the generation that will follow them will be even more so. It's just going to be commonplace, and we see it as these literally are assistants. And I think that there's a great benefit there, whether it be based on like what I'm interested in learning, and it kind of serves me up more complicated information, or it serves me up, whatever it is that will challenge me next, or provide insight into whatever it is I'm learning, or, it provides help in another way. So I think that that's going to be a very interesting time to kind of use these types of technologies, whether it be those chatbots or whether it be an actual, voice assistant that is housed in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also about the idea of kids programming chatbots or AI and them creating the content that goes behind it. And we created a chatbot with a company to teach students about Native Alaskan history and heritage.
Oh, wow.
In a way that was it was a little bit different. And I should probably connect you to Peter Lasowski, who's doing a lot of this work in education, doing great things, because it what we realized in making it was that our depth of knowledge had to be so deep to be able to answer every response that a kid could give. And so what I find fascinating about this is that when you're creating the back end stuff, not the actual programming, but just the content, and the program is a whole different language, right?
Yep.
Just the content, you have to have so many different responses and know so much about a topic to be able to actually do that effectively, because it's really easy to get lost and to think, oh my gosh, there's so much here. You could, to teach about one Athabascan aspect of their culture, it could take 60 different questions with paragraph long answers just for you to get to, what they eat when it's wintertime, in the interior of Alaska. And so there's so much depth that goes into that. I think personally that is the real advantage of having kids learn how to program this stuff, that their content knowledge has to be so deep that, we talk about like meeting standards. They're just going to blow those out of the water because we're not even thinking deep enough for them to be able to do that. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I agree on so many different fronts. And, I'll bring it into Breakout for 2 seconds, but we have on our site, we have a game builder. And the idea is that students can make their own games. And, the games are the same simple inputs that you would have on any of our locks. So it's, directions and letters and whatnot. And what makes me so excited about that is that basically the students have to know, they have to know not only the content, but they have to know enough content to make it engaging and to have something that their peers would want to play or that their teachers would see value. It's not just a multiple choice type of experience. And, for my own kids, when they get passionate about something, they learn, 10 times more than what was asked of them. And sometimes that learning continues for years. Yes, some of that is based on self-interest, and they just identify with a topic. Like my son is obsessed with like Greek mythology and different things, and he's been for years studying it. And it's above and beyond what you would do if you were answering 3 questions on the back of a worksheet, or studying for an exam, which was finite. I think that when you look at the possibilities for kids to build things that they can interact with, or that others will interact with, and I think that that's key. Also, is like they love the idea that they're sharing it with other people and that they can get feedback from others. There's purpose there, and I think that driven purpose is what builds kind of lets them tap into that passion to keep going and go way beyond the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this ties in great with, I have this partnership with ASCD where I do a newsletter about student-driven learning, and this is the thing that we talk about, that if you have state standards for third graders for reading or writing or whatever, you can design a curriculum to help kids get to that point. But if, on the other hand, you have a topic or a project that they're interested in, that they have choice and voice in, then they're going to go way past those third grade standards, even in third grade, even in first grade, even in kindergarten, and certainly in the higher grades as well, because they care about it. They put the effort in, they want to do it. And, you may not get the exact same path to get to those standards, but you're going to blow past them almost every single time. And I personally haven't seen a situation where you give kids that opportunity and they care about something and they don't learn way more than we could have ever expected them to in a traditional setting, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love that open-endedness.
Mm-hmm.
I think my biggest problem with assignments is that most of the assignments that my own kids get, most of the assignments that I gave very, very early on in teaching, and I was lucky enough to be able to see it and change it, is assignments that were very linear. You're expected to do this, and this is what I want, and I want 30 of the same, and giving them that open-endedness so that they can kind of bring their own learning and understanding to it. And I think for teachers, the biggest thing is it's hard to grade that. It's hard to assess what's been done and how well it's been done. But I think that there's, as we look at learning as more than kind of just a assessment, and we look at it as more than just, kind of work produced, in a way that you could easily judge it. I think we're going to see kids really tapping into kind of that passion and building stuff, not only that's meaningful, but stuff that challenges them and that they are able to kind of really, tap into some new territories.
Yeah, absolutely. I see those kinds of things happening all the time when we give kids choice and voice. And I think if we, tie this into AI where they are creating something, you could teach the kid a skill to create a chatbot and they could do it on any topic, right? And so,
yep.
So you spend your time in class teaching the skill of creating a chatbot, because that probably needs a little bit more direct instruction. And then you say, create about whatever you want. And then the grading process is, can I get through that, or can your peers get through that? And, the content standards will, be exceeded very easily. And the programming skills will show themselves very quickly if you were able to, have their answers, move you along the path. And, just reframing how we think about education just in that little bit really opens up the opportunity for incredible depth and complexity that we just typically don't see in traditional schools. So anyway, this has been a great conversation, and I look forward to meeting you at FETC. And
likewise.
The last question that I have is, what is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you?
Oh, I think one thing that a leader can do, and that I respect deeply in leaders that do this, is having a conversation with their stakeholders. And again, oftentimes principals will talk to the staff. I love when principals have meaningful conversations with a student. So if it was me, I would take a student or a small group of students, if you don't have a student advisory group, but, create one and ask a few questions about things that are going on, changes that you're presuming, willing to make or wanting to make or presuming need to be fixed, and kind of get a voice from a stakeholder that will affect the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion. All right. Just a reminder, you can follow Adam Bellow on Twitter at Adam Bellow, or go to his website, adambellow.com. And of course, check out Breakout EDU at breakoutedu.com or .org. I don't remember now.
.com.
.com. That's what I thought. All right. Breakoutedu.com. And thanks again, Adam, so much for being part of Transformative Principal.
Thanks so much, Jethro. Talk to you soon.